All right, welcome back to KM6LYW Radio, the show about amateur radio or ham radio, reimagining radio in the information age. Hey, let's make an amateur radio data go box. What's in your box? This time on KM6LYW Radio. Yep. All right, welcome back. Yeah, everyone else gets to do a bumper music thing. I'm just bummed I don't get any copyright strikes. A better guitar player would get copyright strikes. You know, everyone has some sort of end of days prepping go box for communications and amateur radio, but most of them are voice related and a lot of them are really cool. So I thought, hey, let's do a data go box where we can do email, bulletin board, texting, SMS, all of that here in the smallest possible box with a reasonable amount of power on VHF. So those are kind of my requirements. So I can't possibly unload all of the stuff out of this box and then reassemble it in the time frame of a YouTube video. It took a lot of effort to cram that stuff in here, but that was one of the requirements, is to have something very small, durable, compact, lightweight. So we're going to go over the parts that go into this. This is an amateur radio data transceiver, so you operate the entire thing with your Wi-Fi device or Bluetooth device. A cell phone will work just fine. We can do SMS, email, bulletin board, APRS networking, all that, digipeating, all from the campsite or the trail. So this would be like a boat in or a car camper type of box. To be honest, when it comes to gains per ground, like if I'm backpacking, this is it. This is the sum total of my go box. So there you go. Let's start at the beginning. The center of the system is a large battery. So this is a 6 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. I forget the brand name, i80 or something like that, but whatever the cheapest one is on Amazon. It's worked out really well. I initially started with a Baofeng Mini. I said a lot of cool things about this one. I said because the receiver on this one is so much better than the original Baofeng, but then when I started transmitting, it has two killer flaws. One, there's some sort of whining noise on the transmission audio, and two, there is a transmit tail of about 300 milliseconds. So if you're doing APRS, you're not going to mind that. But if you're doing back and forth AX.25 networking and you need that transmit receiver turnaround time to be right now, for some reason, these push-to-talk buttons are just a suggestion. When you let up on push-to-talk, it continues to transmit. So instead of the Baofeng, I went with an old beat-up version of this. I have several of these. This is my favorite HT, but the one in the box here is beyond thrashed. It's just worn out, but it does just enough stuff to be in the go box. There's no GPS. The volume knob doesn't work. But that's okay. It's still my favorite radio, and it's perfect in the go box. So at the center of this thing, we have a Raspberry Pi 02 wireless. So this is about $18. I'll put links to all this stuff in the description, you guys. So that's what you see here. And then there's a nifty little screen that's attached to that. It's maybe an extra $12 to show you the status of the DigiPi. Now you need some way to connect your radio to the Raspberry Pi. So, what I've been using is the AIOC adapter, maybe $30. I took one of these. I didn't get the one with the prongs on it. You can buy them without the prongs. And then I fashioned a cable that would fit from this to the Yaesu radio. In fact, I've got a whole video on how to build a TNC cable for your Yaesu. And that basically gives that Yaesu a USB data port for audio in, audio out, push to talk, and ground. It's really that simple. I know you're thinking, hey, Craig, you said 30 watts, right? So how are you going to get 30 watts out of your HT? Well, I got a couple of these. This is a VHF amplifier. There's lots of different brands. I like these Radio Shack ones. They don't make them anymore. This is back when Radio Shack used to be like cool. Actually existed. And it's got the big connectors on the back. This is 30 watts, so 5 watts in, 30 out. And what's cool is you can optionally turn this off and on if you want to save power. Okay, so this rig, unlike any other rigs, will actually go from 0.1 watts, which is just the HT alone, all the way up through 30 watts, which is with the amplifier on. I know you're thinking, so 30 watts, that's going to burn through that battery instantly. Well, with packet radio, you're only transmitting for fractions of a second, and it's only like 5 or 6 amps, like 70 watts, actually measured it. But it's only for a quick second. And, with the small solar panel, you can actually keep up with that all day if the sun is out. So that is that on the amplifier. And we've also got a USB PD power distribution port that has a USB A, and C there. I'll put that, this has a on-off switch. It's for amusement purposes only, and it doesn't actually do anything, but hey, it does power delivery, so you can also plug your phone into the power delivery device here and go that route. For power distribution, I would suggest you go with whatever power connector you like. I use Dean's connectors just because I always have. If I was to do it all over again, I'm sure I would use power poles. Make sure you have a fuse on here. I have a 15 amp fuse in this guy right here. Also make sure there's an extra battery terminal somewhere hanging out so you can plug in a solar charge controller. In fact, I've got one of those right here. This, I don't know, 15 bucks. This is cheap. Just a constant current charge controller. Brings it up to 14.2 volts. I've got a half an amp or a 5-watt panel here. I can just put this on top of the unit right here while it's in the sun. This whole thing has a case, which I guess wasn't obvious to begin with, but you can actually close this. I leave it cracked. It's just like an ammo box you can get real cheap. I don't know, I got it like a Bass Pro Shop, but everything magically fit. I mean just barely. This thing touches the roof of that with a little tiny piece of foam. And lastly, and probably more importantly, if power is a concern, get a good antenna and get it up high. So I like this N9TAX. I have used these for years and years and years. This is simple window line, and it is actually a roll-up J-pole configuration for VHF, and I'm using RG58 or just about everywhere, and SMA adapter. So that is that, and I think we covered all of the junk that was in there. The last thing, and I'll be honest, this is probably the most important thing, is there's at least a dozen, maybe 9 or 10 of these ferrite cores, okay? NA6D is also selling USB cables that has the cores built in. This actually has 2 suppressors. Because I'll be honest, this is a lot of RF and USB cables all getting together and touching. And if you get RF on a USB cable, you are gonna have a bad time. So if your system jams on first transmit, I guarantee you that's RF on those USB or power or data cables. Make sure all of your stuff is tight. Make sure these grounds are solid. If these grounds are a little wonky and you're just relying on skin effect, those coax cables are going to be radiators, and they're touching USB cables. The actual Raspberry Pis, the USB ports actually have sensors for RFI, and if it's excessive, it'll shut down the USB port. That's why it goes into constant transmit on their first transmit, is because the USB ports are detecting RFI. Actually, it says EMI if you look at the system log, electromagnetic interference, ? So yeah, it engages push to talk, it shuts down the USB port, and it never has a chance to turn off push to talk. That's why you get jam on first transmit. All right, so we talked about cores. I really can't stress this enough. A lot of guys are building DigiPis, and it just sticks on transmit the whole time, man. These are not optional in an HT type of environment. You might get away with it in a mobile environment. The other big thing that helps is to get this up high, away from your rig. If you're to put a little antenna right here, it's just going to wash that whole system with RF, and you're gonna have a bad time. So let's get to the fun part. Let's do some operations here. So like I said before, we've got APRS, we've got digipeating, we've got web chat, AX.25 networking, we got email back and forth. All of those are the packet modes that we're going to use on VHF. Now, we can't use FT8 and slow scan T. I guess we could on VHF, but we're not going to demonstrate those. In fact, that's a whole nother topic for another video, is can you make an HF version of this? It's obviously going to be bigger and heavier, but I bet you could get pretty close, maybe with the 50 caliber ammo can. That would be pretty cool. And you can do APRS and HF too on 30 meters. So, okay, anyways, now I got to build an HF version, one of these. All right, so we got the DigiPi here running. So I'm going to turn on the APRS encoder, decoder here. Just press that button. It's going to turn into a DigiPi TNC. Now it's decoding APRS. This is set to 144.39. The audio saver or RX saver, RX saver is off. You don't want it to have a duty cycle at all. You want to receive everything. It is set to a frequency 14439 here in America. You're going to be at 144.8 in Europe. And you can see it's already pulling in stations from the APRS network. This is connected via an antenna that's coming out of the side of the box to a Diamond X200 on the roof, just to give you set some expectations for reception. Of course, I'm in the middle of nowhere in the country here as well. All right, so the APRS TNC and iGate is on. I can just click up here and see what the system status is. Now, this is a tablet that we're looking at. Actually, no, this is a web browser, but it could be a web browser on your tablet or your phone. And this is where you can turn all the services off and on. And I can turn on APRS web chat as well. And this is basically a messaging interface for APRS packet radio. It's a global network. You know, you can do, these radios have APRS built in, but doing messaging on a 10 key, it's awful. So that's why we wrote APRS web chat. We click down here on the launch link, and we see the web chat interface. So, and to start off, let's put in a call sign. It could be any amateur radio call sign. This one is SMS. This is put together by Michael Phelps. This is an iGate call sign, so we can talk to it. We're actually bridging APRS and the internet to get so we can actually send a message from a radio to a cell phone or a mobile phone. I can do at, and a phone number, but I set up an alias, so I don't have to give out my phone number. And this is a test from RF to SMS. And I can send that, and we can watch it go wild. It's transmitting, receiving. I do hear that amplifier clicking. You know what would be cool is if we could get a, there's my message that I just sent myself. And I can actually it'd be cool if we can get an amplifier that has no relays in it. Because for me, I don't like having moving parts and stuff. There's no fans in here. It's just stuff that can break and say this is a reply. Now this is going over SMS, okay, and back through the SMS APRS gateway, and then it's going to hit RF. Make sure you send your position now and then, because that way the system knows where you are. Okay, did I actually send it? This is a reply. Yeah, there it is. This is a reply, and I actually got it in the APRS web chat interface. So DigiPi, which is the Raspberry Pi here, it kind of turns your radio into a website, and so this is the web chat interface for that. So hey, we just sent and received an SMS. That's pretty cool if you're in the woods or at the lake or camping. You want to let the XYL know when to pick you up or something like that, and there's no cellular service. This will really get out. In fact, 30 watts, this with an elevated antenna, we're talking about most of a state and several counties. So let's do email real quick. We can start AX.25 networking. And then we also want to start the PAT WinLink email client. We'll turn that on. Those two things. If we wanted to do HF, we would start the RDOT modem first. And then the PAT would use that. So here we are, AX.25 node, PAT email client. It turns all the other stuff off that would be in conflict. And then we click on PAT here. And we can see I already got some email. There's our inbox, our outbox. It's just like a regular email interface. We have a net, for WinLink check-ins, so the NCAL WLink net. I recommend you join that. It's open to just about anyone, and just see how you can connect. You can say how you connect with that string there. And they will give you this is like the size of an email you can get over amateur radio, right? That's pretty darn cool. So if I want to do an action connect, I want to check my email, I could compose. I could actually enter a, foo@gmail.com and then, compose a message. I'm actually just going to check my email. So I'm just going to do action. That would go in my outbox and then connect. And then I'm going to make sure the transport is AX.25 because that's what we're using for VHF. And every now and then click on update cache. It'll download all of the stations on VHF in your area and beyond your area to your DigiPi. And I'm just going to check into, I don't know, what's a close one here? Well, KM6LYW-10. I can say connect, and here it goes. We're off to the races. We're transmitting, receiving, and this is 30 watts through a big antenna on the roof. It says connecting to KM6LYW-10, and I'm on the wrong frequency. Make sure you put it on one. In this case, I'm at 145.050. Yeah, I think I'm on the right frequency. I got the flashlight here just to make sure. No, we are still on 145.050. That is our packet radio frequency. And you can see down here it says connecting to KM6LYW-10 AX.25 Linux. So we're actually using the Linux AX.25 network stack in this case. And it's connecting out to through KM6LYW-10, which is another radio, a lot like this one. and it connects to the internet and checks my email. It checked and then it says disconnected. So there we go. We just did email. We can download, read them. Email back and forth on the DigiPi. If you really want to get crazy, you can get into like, you can do bulletin board stuff. There's actually a bulletin board on here. This is getting kind of off the rails here, but there's a chat room on here, so you can chat with a bunch of other people that have the same kind of TNC or radio. You can do chat. There it is, one user and 2 channels, and say, hey, that's going out over the radio. So this is all using AX.25 networking, and that's honestly one of my favorite modes. I'm totally digging it. So we did send an SMS, we sent email, we did some AX.25 networking. We've all done this on battery or ideally solar panels. This is kind of what it looks like in the wild. So this is the ammo box. I think this is like $16 at a sporting goods store, and I just crammed everything in there. The amplifier's on the very bottom of this. I've got this little 5-watt solar panel on there and a silly solar charge controller. Get a pulse width modulated controller. I know they're not efficient, but the MPPT controllers, the maximum power point tracking controllers, they have a really high cycle rate, and it tears apart VHF. It's really you'll be disappointed with your VHF reception. In fact, you might not even know because you can't hear it, that you're really destroying your reception when you have a MPPT solar charger. Or maybe you can get one that has enough filters on it. I don't know. But down here we have me with the solar panel, giving it some shade, got it cracked open because, it is 30 watts. It might generate some heat. And this is half an amp, okay, the solar panel. And the actual power budget for this thing in receive mode with the TNC, the Pi, the radio, and the amplifier, we are at 3.6 watts. That's nothing. Like when it's receiving, it actually goes up to 4 watts from time to time. But when you're just receiving, 3.6 watts. With the 6 amp hour battery, which is what we have here, that's 21 hours. If you have a 5-watt solar panel, which is what that is, we're talking about indefinite reception and minor transmit, because you're really not transmitting that much. If you turn the amplifier off, that is a watt right there. That saves you even more. Maybe you just want a 5-watt system. Maybe it's cloudy today. You can go 33 hours with just the radio and no amplifier, which is underneath all of that. This thing draws a watt all by itself and receive. It has a little preamp in it, which is kind of cool to get rid of some of the insertion loss. The transmit at 30 watts, that's transmit at a 30 watt output actually draws 70 watts of power off of this battery. So yeah, that's quite a bit. So you can turn down the power in your radio, like take it down to 1 watt. That would make this a 10-watt system kind of thing, or just turn the amplifier off altogether. If I'm at Shasta Lake, I think I only need 5 watts because if I can get this in the air, I don't need a lot of power. So that is our power budget. I do have the squelch on because for some reason the Yaesu draws more power while it is receiving. No idea why. A lot more power actually. But that's just every now and then. I get my voltage reading. That's important too. Off the radio itself, it'll tell you how many volts are left in your battery, so you know how to budget if you're getting enough sunshine, that kind of stuff. You want to these solar chargers will actually stop. I think this one's at constant current. It'll max out at 14.2 volts, and that's kind of what you want for the solar charge controller. So that is the entire shebang in an ammo can. I don't know, and I can just close it up like this, and I can just put this under a tree. I've got the antenna just kind of coming out of the back here. This is an SMA adapter. I can actually goes in and turn it. I technically have this connected to my diamond antenna on the roof. That's what that coax cable is. So this is the ammo box, really cheap, really small. I'm going with 8 pounds, 9 pounds. These amplifiers are kind of heavy in the battery, obviously, at 6 amp hours for that battery. That's 78 watt hours. So yeah, if you're only doing 3 watts with everything turned on and you got 76 watt hours, that's 21 hours of usage with no solar. And if you get the solar, it runs indefinitely. So this obviously went through several preparations. I call this preparation G right here, where I was using the Baofeng. I really thought this would work, but it's got the whine on transmit. It's using the AIOC adapter, this thing here. And it's got the squelch tail. It will transmit. It has a transmit tail about 300 milliseconds, and for AX.25, it just doesn't work. Maybe it's the squelch tail eliminator, but I can't figure out how to turn that off. Guys, help me out. I need a Baofeng expert there. So that was the Baofeng. In fact, we've got a APRS droid running there too. If you guys are into this, Michael Phelps has this working here. I can do, send position, and you can see it's going nuts here. So you can do APRS droid as well. Maybe you want the map. Get the offline maps too, because Michael Phelps made a new version APRS droid, which is really cool. So you can see Northern California here, all the stations that are popping up in Berkeley. So maybe I want to talk to one of these stations. I can click on him. I can send him a message. Go over to messages here. I can do the SMS stuff that we just talked about. So APRS Droid really got some cool new features right now. Hey, all right. Thank you for hanging out with me. I try and do, there's a lot of patrons for the channel here. This is kind of like the patron chapter of this. But instead of scrolling all the patrons, I want to do a patron highlight here. We've got Jack, VA7, Yankee Bravo India. Yeah, that's the Great White North. Thank you for coming through and sending me a picture of your DigiPi setup. We can see we've got a dual band rig down here. We've got a scanner down here. We've got a tablet running APRS Droid. And also, and more importantly, we've got DigiPi kind of hanging out down here, doing TNC mode, just like we showed. In fact, we see a VA7 NIC is sending some sort of messaging traffic through to our patron here. This is Jack. Hey, thanks a bunch. I really appreciate it, Jack. And send me those pictures, guys. I don't want to promote distracted driving here, but Jack, I know you're doing the right thing, so thank you. Again, patrons of the channel not only get rid of all the adverts on my shows here. I hate ads, but it gives you access to the digipi.org website, and it gives you access to the DigiPi SD card image, which is actually running in this Raspberry Pi. So you get a $18 Raspberry Pi, you put that SD card in it, and you turn it on, go through the initialize process, and you get this whole web-based interface for all digital and data modes, and do everything we did here today. So this is like how you set it up. It goes to the Wi-Fi hotspot, so if you're on the summit or in the field, you can do everything I did on a 10 network address. It becomes its own hotspot. A lot of different radio interface adapters. Masters Communications built some cool hardware. You can have a big screen. You can do an APRS tracker, email. And now we haven't talked about HF today, but we can do WSJTX, FLDigi. We can do it all on your tablet here, right? Like in the easy chair. What was that? JS8 call. We can do CW, slow scan television. And of course, I showed you guys the bulletin board. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. My name is Craig, amateur radio call sign KM6LYW. I'm in California and I'm clear.